Today on The Occult Detective, we're going to talk about Laurell K. Hamilton and her Anita Blake series. So it's 2023, which means that Anita Blake is turning 30 years old. Laurell K. Hamilton released the first Anita Blake story in 1993. That was a book called Guilty Pleasures. I have a unique perspective on Laurell K. Hamilton's work because I've known her since I was 14 years old. Laurell K. Hamilton happened to attend the same high school as me. I live in a very rural part of Indiana, and our school corporation was made up of a bunch of very small towns that all came together into a consolidated high school. I lived in the town of Converse, population of about 900 people, and about 15 minutes or so to the south of Converse was a little town called Sims, and it probably had a population of maybe 300 or 400 people, and that is where Lori Klein lived with her grandmother. Lori was a couple of years older than me. We actually met in 1980. She was an avid Dungeons and Dragons player, and I had started playing in 1978, and a Oak Hill Dungeons and Dragons club kind of sprang up. Now, because of the way the towns were scattershot, we had one club where we kind of chatted and stuff in lunchtime and study halls and such. But when game times came, predominantly, the Sims kids played together, the Converse kids, the Swayze kids, the Sweetser kids. You get the idea. And every once in a while, we would cross-pollinate each other's games. So in 1980, I went to a bookstore in Marion, Indiana, where they were having a Dungeons and Dragons event where the older kids that played Dungeons and Dragons were meeting, Redbeards, and Lori, along with several others, put on a Dungeons and Dragons demonstration. It was entertaining. They played differently than I did, but I was younger. I had started out with the Blue Book, with the Holmes rules. So I played in a couple of games with Lori as a fellow player. Most notably the Frost Giant module. So that was my first time gaming with her, and then she DM'd for me and friends a couple of times when I visited in Sims. I was really good friends with her younger cousin. He's one of my very best friends, and we still hang out today. Of that Dungeons and Dragons group, there was one person who we were all pretty confident was going to end up being a writer, and that was not myself, and it was not Lori. Lori was very shy. She was very smart. She was pretty, but very, kind of introverted. And as I said, she had grown up with her grandmother because her mother had died tragically in a car crash when she was very young, and her grandmother was very traditional, very Southern, and just I'm sure Lori felt, kind of oppressed, by just the way her grandmother kind of ruled that house. Um, so Lori ended up, graduating high school, going off to college, getting married, and then all of a sudden, hey, Lori has a fantasy novel out, Night Seer. And I went right out and bought it. Very good. I really enjoyed it. Had it put me in mind of like Marion Zimmer Bradley, that type of fiction, and yeah, I definitely saw the Dungeons and Dragons Lori that I knew, and it was quite good. And she wrote a Ravenloft novel. She wrote a Star Trek novel, and then the Anita Blake series took off. Anita Blake was urban fantasy. Um, if you've not read the books, you're probably familiar with True Blood. It shared a lot of similarities with Charlene Harris's books. Laurell's books came first. But for me, I was just interested in my friend and her success. I really enjoyed the first 9 books in particular. I think the series kind of went off the rails a bit there, and there's 28 of them now, something like that. So yeah, I did stop reading the Anita Blake stories right around book 11, just because, as I said, I didn't care for the direction it was going in. Anita Blake raises zombies, she executes vampires, and solves supernatural mysteries. Interesting that we both kind of fell into that genre. One of the things that I appreciated about Lori is that she turned me on to Robert E. Howard's horror fiction. I mean, I was a huge Conan fan, and we were talking Howard, because obviously with the Dungeons and Dragons connection that we had in school. And she had read some, but she said, I really like his horror stories. And I said, I've not read any. So she loaned me Pigeons from Hell. And of course, I loved it. And I started devouring just anything I could get my hands on Howard related. Well, anyway, the reason for the video is I wanted to congratulate her on 30 years of Anita Blake. It's a great character. She's a talented author, and I'm glad that she found the success she did, and I wish her all the best, and here's to 30 more years of Anita Blake.